everybody. My name is Evan, and unfortunately Janae will not be joining us in this video today because today we are doing something a little bit different. Today I want to teach you guys the basics on how to drive a car with manual transmission. I drive a car with manual transmission. I've been doing so for about 7 years now, and I just want Janae to be able to drive my car in case of any emergencies, or if the need ever arises. I want her to be able to be comfortable with it. But there are many other benefits to driving stick shift, such as being fuel efficient, which is very important the way gas prices are looking nowadays, having more control over your car while you're driving, being slightly less expensive in terms of, one, buying a car, and two, the repairs that are gonna have to eventually happen on your car. And four, I think it's overall a little bit safer. It removes distractions while you're driving. Both of your hands and both of your feet are occupied. So I think it makes it a little bit safer. I really hope this is content that you guys are interested in, because I will be having another video where we actually go out to my car and I have Janae try and drive stick. She's attempted it I think 2 or 3 times before in the past, and she's learning, she's getting it. So I want to see how well she's doing, and I want you guys to come along for that. But for now, I'm going to teach you guys using a video game simulation rig that I have. And the game that we're going to be playing is Forza Horizon 5. And it's not exactly like real driving. There are some differences because it is a video game, but it has enough to let me explain the basics and show you guys visually the process of driving stick without putting anybody in harm's way in a safe video game environment. So first, I'm going to talk about the difference between a manual transmission car and an automatic car. So in any car, your car is going to move through gears as you accelerate and decelerate. Most cars have either 5 or 6 gears, but some can go as high as 10, and that's in certain automatic and semi-automatic cars. Now, automatics provide the leisure of moving your gears in your car's transmission for you. In a manual transmission car, you are moving the gears yourself, and this is going to give you more control over your vehicle. But before we can start learning how to drive stick, I have to teach you guys the basics on the mechanics of what goes on in the transmission of a manual car. Now, I'm not a mechanic or an engineer, so this is going to be a simplified breakdown, and it's basically the way that I learned it. And so the whole process is, when you turn your car on and the engine turns over, I think of it as a mechanism that is always rotating, constantly rotating, and that is connected to your gas pedal. So the harder you press on your gas pedal, the faster that mechanism or your engine is going to spin. The transmission is another spinning component, and this component is attached to your wheels. And so when you're driving, the two are combined, they're both spinning at the same time. So when you press on the gas, the engine spins, the transmission spins, the wheels go faster, you go faster. In an automatic car, all of this happens, the gears change, and all of that is done without you knowing it. You can probably hear it, but you don't have to do anything. In a manual transmission car, you have to change the gears so that you can spin the engine faster, because each gear can only spin up to a certain point. Then you have to go to the next gear so it can spin even faster. And to do that, you have to disconnect the engine and the transmission from each other, change a gear, and then bring them back together. That is the most basic way that I can describe it. Next, we have to understand how to disconnect the engine from the transmission. And to begin, I'm going to show you guys the 2 differences that you're going to see in a manual transmission car versus an automatic transmission car. So here is our simulation rig, and the biggest difference is down here. You are going to see a third pedal. This is your clutch pedal. This is only pressed by your left foot, and that is the pedal that is going to disconnect your transmission from the engine. When the pedal is fully pushed down, the transmission and the engine are separated. When the clutch pedal is released, the engine and transmission come back together. The only other time that the engine and transmission are not together is when your car is in neutral, when your gear shifter is in neutral. And this is the second difference in a manual transmission car. So this is now your gear shifter. There's no longer just a park, drive, neutral, reverse. There is this stick that wiggles and it goes through different gates. And that gated pattern that it goes through is called an H pattern. And most cars have the same H pattern. As you can see, it's not labeled on this shifter, but the gearing goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 usually, whether 5 or 6 is your highest gear. First gear is to the left and up. Second gear is to the left and down. Third gear is straight up. Fourth gear straight back. Fifth gear all the way to the right and up. And if you have a sixth gear, all the way to the right and down. Now, what I bring it back to, this is neutral, where you can shake, if the rig would stay steady, this is where you can shake your gear shifter freely. That is neutral. That is your safe spot when you are first learning how to drive manual. If you're ever concerned about what to do next, if you're in gear and you're driving, you press in the clutch, take the gear shifter out of your gear and keep it in neutral, release the clutch, and now your car is going to basically be cruising just like you would in an automatic, and then you can press on the brake and that's going to stop your car. That is your safe spot. Always check when you are in neutral to make sure you are in neutral. And then the other difference with the gear shifter is reverse. So in my car, reverse is all the way to the right and down. In this simulation rig, you have to press down on the gear shifter and then bring it to the right and down. This all depends on your car. Sometimes they're to the left and up. You just have to read the H pattern. And finally, before we can actually start our driving lesson, I have to explain the process on how to change a gear. Now, first gear is the most difficult one to get and also the most difficult one to master. This is the gear that you're always going to start your car in. It's always going to be your takeoff gear. And it requires a balancing act with both your left and your right leg. So the process of changing gears involves, well, first of all, anytime you want to move your gear shifter, you have to put the clutch in, unless your engine is off. If the engine is off, you don't have that rotating mechanism, you don't have to worry about putting the clutch in. You can freely change your gears, although it's not necessary because you're not driving. But when your engine is on, clutch goes in, move your gear shifter to the gear that you want it in. To start off, we are going into first. So, to change a gear, you're going to fully press in the clutch with your left foot, take your gear shifter and move it into the gear that you want it to be in, and then you are going to, and this is the balancing act. So from here, your foot is on the brake, your right foot is on the brake, your left foot is in the clutch, your gear shifter is in first gear. You're going to take your foot off the brake, hoping that you're not on a hill, so you won't roll back. And then you are going to slowly release the clutch. And there's a certain point that you can feel the car start to go forward. And the car might start to shake. That is called your biting point. That is the point right before your engine and transmission come back together and your car is going to move. But to get it to move, you're going to slowly press on the accelerator. And at the same time, you're going to do this balancing act to make sure that you're giving an equal amount of gas to the amount that you are releasing your clutch. And so once you finally release the clutch and give it enough gas, your car is going to start to move. And that is the hardest part to get when starting to learn this process. It was the hardest part for me. I stalled a lot, especially on hills. And you're going to be thinking over and over to yourself, like when you're first starting, like clutch in, put it in gear, release a little bit on the gas. It's going to be going through your mind constantly until it becomes muscle memory. It's just a thing that has to happen. And speaking of stalling, that's something that's inevitable when you first start learning stick shift driving. Stalling is basically if you are in gear and you let out the clutch too fast, or you're not giving it enough gas as you're releasing the clutch. Your engine is rotating, the transmission doesn't match it, kind of stops the process of your engine, shuts your car off. This is fine for a few times. You don't want to do it 10 times in a row. It's not great for your engine or your engine life. So what you do, since this is inevitable, is your engine shuts off, take your car out of gear, don't worry about the clutch or anything like that. Just remove your car out of gear, press on the brake. Okay? Just make sure you come to a safe stop. Then you're going to put your foot in the clutch, make sure your car is in neutral, turn it over, start again. That is another difference that I forgot to mention about manual and automatic cars. To start an automatic car, you just turn the key. To start a manual transmission car, your foot has to be in the clutch, and then you turn the key, because you can't spin your engine if it's connected to your transmission when your wheels aren't going anywhere, when you're stable. So you can't spin something if it's connected to something that's stationary. So you have to disconnect, start your engine, and then it's in neutral, it can come back together. So continuing on in talking about changing gears, after you've gotten first gear down, then the process becomes a little bit simpler to upshift. You don't have to balance as much when going through the next gears. So after first, say you're cruising along, then you want to go to second because you're picking up speed. You simply take your foot out of the gas, press in the clutch, make your gear change, release the clutch at the same time as you give gas, but it doesn't have to be the slow process that you did for first gear. Okay, it can be a little bit faster, and the higher you go in your gears, the faster you can change and switch and release the clutch. Now, when you drive an automatic car, I'm sure the things that you are looking at in your gauge cluster or your tachometer are your speedometer and, I don't know, maybe your gas gauge or your temperature gauge. But in a manual transmission car, it's very important to take a look at your RPMs, or your RPM gauge. And these are your revolutions per minute. This is very important when driving a manual transmission car. Your revolutions per minute are basically, in a simpler term, how many times your engine spins per minute. Okay, that's the simple way to say it. And it's important to look at this number because it can tell you when to upshift if you're not listening to your engine. It can help guide you when you're in first gear if you know that you need to press the gas pedal down at 2,000 RPMs in order to match the speed of the engine, of the transmission as you release, to get you started in first gear. And I like to advise people to upshift between 3,500 and 4,500 RPMs if they're just cruising normally. You can always, and this is the beauty of manual transmission cars, you can always shift your gear whenever you want. You can do it at 2,000 RPM, you can do it close to red line, although I would advise not going to red line all the time, because red line is the red numbers on your RPM gauge. That's a factory installed limit on the car. It's called a rev limiter, so that you cannot rev your engine past a certain point because it's going to break down your engine and reduce your engine life. So there's always a sweet spot for upshifting at a certain RPM. It's different for all cars. You just have to find it in your car when you drive. So with all that being said, I tried to include some visuals as I was saying it, But I know people are learners by seeing, some are learners by hearing. In manual transmission cars, you can do both or one or the other, but it is very important to learn by doing. So I'm going to explain downshifting and going in reverse when we get into the game. So let's hop in the car.